Hello, everyone. All right, so let's do an overview of personal selling. Hope everyone's having a great week. This is chapter 1. So, we're going to look at what is personal selling, distinguish between some different approaches and styles, and move forward from there to help build this whole sales side for golf management. We'll talk about the different approaches, understanding the steps associated, and all these things will help lead to you having a better understanding of the assignments and stuff like that. So, what is personal selling? All right. So, one of the definitions relies on the interpretation between buyers and sellers to initiate, develop, and enhance customer relations. It's different than other marketing approaches, but I want to actually really dive in. So, most of you are salespeople, and I hope you understand the importance of that job. Most people cannot be great salespeople. Usually, if you're using an analysis tool like DISC, you may have heard of it. Usually, you have to be high I and high D. That represents only about 30% of the population, not even. So it is not a majority of people that can often be good salespeople by nature. Everyone can develop skills to be better at it. Usually things like confidence and other things are key components to being a successful salesperson. Okay. One of the keys for long-term, so there's two types of selling when at a simplistic aspect. One-time sales where you're only trying to get a sale once and then you really don't care about the customer, and then others are more long-term based. In the golf industry, it's almost always long-term based. Even if it's an individual transaction like an individual golf round, you want those people to play more, want them to feel comfortable to come back, and then maybe become members, so on and so forth. So most selling, and the selling we're going to focus on, is going to be built on the fact that these are long-term customers where you do need to be successful building trust and commitment from them, and showing commitment back, as well as also showing great experience so that you create good value for the customer and providing an appropriate selling approach for that. So we are going to focus on those long-term customers, repeat customers, and that is a solid representation of the golf industry for sure. So they have to perceive value in your product. So, for example, if you're at a golf course that charges $250 a round, you have to create a perception of greater value than a golf course that charges $120 a round. And otherwise, eventually people are going to be like, no, if they're close enough together, proximity, I'll go with the 120 because I'm getting better value for my money. So it's really important you work hard to develop that side of creating value for what you're doing. Okay, I don't care if it's in the golf industry or other. If you're selling anything, creating that value proposition is critical for any sales position. And I think most of you have now worked in sales or getting into it or have in the past, understand that creating that value proposition is the difference between being an okay salesperson and a good one who, is a top performer. So how some people define value, that's a tough one. What I will say, as someone who has witnessed great salespeople and not so great, let me give you an example. I had a beer cart girl that did literally double the sales of any other beer cart girl, in this case, it was really interesting because it was nothing to do with how polite she was. It had nothing to do with whether she was attractive or not. What it had to do was actually building relationships. And it was a great example of the differentiator. A lot of people who did the beer cart did it as a transaction, where this person, who was the top performer by a lot, did it based on the fact that it was relationship based. And so little things like, she would get off the beer cart and come and talk to them, see how their round's going. She knew not to interrupt them while they were swinging, knew the basic golf course etiquette. stuff like that. But then we'd just do little things like, they'd hit a good shot, she'd give them a high five. That connectivity was huge. And honestly, day in, day out, crushed everybody else. And it was all because she followed that approach of building the relationship, building their trust. When they came, in relation to that, she also then made the Greatest Tips by a lot. And it was one where I tried to get others to mimic her approach because she was just so successful at it. And it's always great to see when someone does that type of job so successfully. So we get into sales dialogue. We'll jump into that more in future weeks as well. Okay. How do you define, the purpose of these conversations? So like the 1, 2, 3, 4 here showing. So you demonstrate what you offer. You show the unique need that it has or the new unique need it solves, and so on and so forth. So if you think about it, let's pick golf. Golf's a really straightforward one. They want to go golfing. That part isn't the issue. The issue is how do you make sure they want to go golfing at your facility? What is it that matters? Well, I can tell you some things that are of issue that you have to protect against. Simple things like if you're going to have 7-hour rounds, you're going to have very upset clients, very upset customers. Okay. So does tee time management matter? Potentially. Does how the spacing of your tee times matter for that example? Most likely, yes. Having a good marshal on board that keeps the flow of traffic going well without offending people? Absolutely. Things like that can make such a difference in the overall feeling, because for most of us that have worked on a golf course, I've had people, when I was the assistant pro at Horseshoe, for example, I had someone come up on the 9th. They teed off in 1, great move, came at 9, nose to nose, almost wanted to punch me. I was so mad because of how bad the round was and how horrible the golf course was. And then we worked hard on the back nine to make sure it ran smoothly, and came in on 18, and the person apologized, gave me a hug. It was the greatest day, ended up birdieing 18, and it was the best experience of their life. So what you have to learn is with this, people are very emotional sometimes, and they develop, or their perception of value can change based on those emotions. So you want to work very hard to build a dialogue. I did not. I could have very easily have ended that relationship with that person by being rude or condescending or kicked them off because they had earned it at that moment. But instead I built a client that actually kept coming back over and over, and ended out, they just were having a bad day on the first 9, and after that they were actually a pretty good person. All right. So continuing along, you would have reviewed these points. So communicating and delivering the value, negotiations, that's always part of it too. Especially someone who's a long-term customer likes a little bit of ebb and flow on this, or some ability to feel like they got something. So that can be as simple as, throwing them a bag of teas and just saying, thanks so much. Or if they're short, give them your bag, whatever. Just little things like that can make the smallest difference, because when we talk about dialogue, it's not just the words, it's your actions that matter, and we do dive more into dialogue as we proceed. So professionalism, this has evolved greatly over the years. Professionalism used to mean, okay, you're dressed up, you're super snazzy, everything, you look really good, you dress well. Now it has a lot more to do with how you communicate, the words you use, non-aggressive tactics, to communicate effectively with people, trying to de-escalate anger, stuff like that. For example, for any of you that have been lucky enough to go to Top Golf in the US, it is a super fun experience. I think it is one of the futures of golf, in the sense of really introducing new people to the game in a fun and exciting way. The way it's set up, a brand new beginner can compete with an experienced player, because you can set their different difficulties when they're shooting and what their expectation is to get points. I mean, it was awesome. I've seen some of the best, most interesting evolution of the game and things like that. So I'm a big proponent for it, just because I actually believe it can help really grow the game. Okay, so for example, in golf, if you're working at a golf course, knowledge is key. How much do you know the golf course? How much do you understand golf? How much can you help with issues related at the facility? Do you know who to go to if an issue happens? Okay, simple one in the fall that we often hit, frost delays. How do you communicate that effectively? Because no one wants to wait when they're looking at that first hole and they see it's perfectly clear. The problem is they don't always appreciate that maybe the third hole's got trees all around it and there's frost all over. If they let them out, they'll kill the golf course. Sometimes you have to learn how to communicate effectively to work around those challenges and make them, at least help them understand the importance. And most of them want to. The problem is they have trouble seeing it sometimes. So you got to work hard to give them that. Okay, so professionalism, like I said, can continue across many aspects. So, is there intensified competition in golf? Yes. Positive side on the other aspect is we do have higher statistical growth in golf than we've seen in decades. Honestly, COVID was a great thing for golf worldwide. The LIV Tour, everything else, we'll get in LIV Tour later on in one of the classes, but my point is that we have seen quite an expansion. We've seen increase in technology like you have in all industries, but the customer base is changing. We're getting more youth into the game. We're getting more women into the game. This used to be a male-dominated sport, still technically is on the math side of it, but we are seeing great improvements on those other aspects to show growth. And so, some exciting times ahead of us. Different types of selling approaches, things like that. And then focusing on how people are trained is very important. The words you use to de-escalate, for example, we'll talk about the HEAT method. Hear, empathize, apologize, take action. As an example, is a proven approach to reduce emotional stress in someone. The hard part is when someone's attacking you verbally, you naturally get more defensive or more angry yourself. So learning how to control yourself is the key. And actually lots of great salespeople talk about you may not be able to control the outcome and you can't control the other person, but what you can control is your emotions and how you respond to that person. And that is very true. I would say that's a good life lesson in general. The key is how you respond. So we do get into the economics of the growth of the industry and stuff like that. And like I said, it's the last few years have been the first time in a long time I've been able to share a lot of positive stats in the trends and issues course, because it is exciting to see that side growing and some real positive signs, not just across the pond, meaning in like Asia and other areas, but also in North America, seeing more rounds per golf course being played, more people getting introduced to the game, younger people playing, like I said, more diversity in gender, all of that. So it's super exciting time. And keep in mind, a salesperson is one of the key drivers to revenue. Revenue being sales, sales being without that, I don't care how good you are with expenses. If you don't have sales, then you can't build profit. There's an old saying we used to have, and not one I firmly believe, but I did incorporate, is that more sales can cover up expense mistakes. Doesn't mean you want to make mistakes in the sense of overspending, but the truth is increasing your revenue and growing that side or your sales helps offset any mistakes or issues you've made on the expense side and helps build a profitable facility. So don't underestimate the value of the salesperson role. It is a critical one for the company. All right. So these are just some comments. Technology assisted. So obviously social media has changed the way we communicate with customers dramatically. CRM stands for Contact Relationship Management System. Basically what it is, it's a database on how you communicate. So if you're at a fair amount of facilities, and Salesforce is up here as an example, you do have ways of reaching out and saying, okay, hey, we have this event on, and it get mass mailed out or mass sent out, can be very effective. But keeping in mind, you also have to look at the demographic of your group. So for example, if they're Generation Xers or very old millennials, so you're talking basically your 40 to 60 range, Facebook is one of the key aspects. But if I'm trying to target a millennial, or even more so a Generation Z, which are the younger groups, now we're getting into 30s and 20s, those groups are looking at something totally different. I mean, Facebook is non-existent for them, so you got to make sure you either have them on Insta or Snap or any other social media avenue out there that works for them. All right, so keeping in mind that this is an ever-evolving system, and if you're targeting people in their 70s, truth is it's more phone calls and emails, and then which group likes being text, which group doesn't, which group likes phone calls, which one doesn't. There's a lot of information, and then also asking for feedback and stuff like that. How you ask and what manner, in the sense, do you do it on Twitter, or do you do it on Facebook, or do you do it by a phone survey or an email? Will depend on age group and preferred methods of communication. So like I said, creating these long-term positive relationships is key. Staying positive can be really hard. When I was working at my first golf course, I was the assistant pro at Horseshoe Valley. I was averaging about 85 hours a week working in the summer. I don't expect most of you to hit those types of numbers, but I have to be honest, when I'm on my 31st day straight of working, trying to sneak in golf because I was becoming a CPGA pro, I was tired. I was fatigued. Really tough to throw a smile on that 81st hour, but that's part of the job, and it can be very fatiguing and a lot of work. But what you do learn is it turns into that value long-term for yourself and the facility. So a lot of you are probably like, 80 hours, that's crazy. It's only 12 hours a day, and I did it over a month straight, a couple months, in a couple summers. But the difference was, to be fair, I was making probably a lot more than most would be at their golf facilities. So what was really happening is I was working about 50 to 55 hours a week in my primary job, because back then, and I'm not even sure if it's true today, as a seasonal worker, they could work you longer without paying you overtime. And then I made my real money as a teacher. So because I had shot in and out as a golf professional, I just was an assistant pro. I had to serve my time before I could become what they called a Class A pro. I was doing another 25 to 30 hours a week teaching. And so at the end of the summer, back in, this would be 1990s, I was pulling down $25,000 a summer in earnings for 3 to 4 months. I didn't work while I was in school. And keeping in mind, if you think about how far back that is and how much money, that was pretty good, pulling down 25. And I even got to 30,000 a couple summers. I had to work a lot, but to be fair, I don't think a lot of you are pulling down that in your summer jobs at golf courses right now. So that was the trade-off I made. Okay. Adaptive selling, stimulus response selling, you've read all this. What I will say, it's key to adapt to situation based on conversation and stuff like that. We're going to actually run some scenarios in this class. We're going to actually have a sales pitch aspect, actually as one of the assignments, stuff like that. Okay. And learning how to build your confidence is good. So I believe next week I do sort of a self-assessment exercise. Understanding your confidence is key. Internal confidence is sometimes tough to build. It's also tough for people to understand. So I really hope most of you are able to do it and find a way to be confident in yourselves. And if not, how to build that are things we're going to work on as we move forward. So these are different approaches: stimulus response approach, which you've reviewed. Okay. So you create a situation or a cue to influence the buyer. So a lot of people who aren't into sales can often refer to this stuff inappropriately, in my opinion, but refer to it as like negatively influencing someone or manipulating them. I don't view it that way because we're not doing anything wrong. We are trying to catch social cues or cues that allow us to give a response that works to convince them to do something that deep down they want to do. We're not trying to force them to buy something they don't want. These people want to golf, or these people want to have this stuff. We just are there to help them understand maybe why they want it or what they can do to make it happen. So some people who are outside the industry can view it more negatively than I would. All right. So then this one, so it's got the AIDA approach, in the sense of the states. So and it's tiered. So you get it first. You get someone's attention, build their interest, then they develop their desire, and the action then is hopefully purchasing or proceeding with it. Okay. And I would say that is an approach that most salespeople use to some degree, because you want to measure where they are. You don't want to try to force the trigger of action if they're just at the interest level. And different industries, timing matters. So for example, with cars, most people don't go into one facility one time and just buy a car without a test drive. Usually it takes a bit of time and nurturing and development to do that. But so for example, taking a round fee payer that, starts attending 5-10 times a year, creating the value proposition for them maybe to become a member, as an example, is something that may take a little bit of time or development. But if you work at and you show them the value to them by doing that, sometimes you can also be very successful in converting them. So, and these are just different approaches. Build rapport, obviously, we've talked about that. Discover buyers' needs. I mean, that's all part of the key to it. Sense of urgency, that is the one it has to be factual in my case. Building a sense of urgency when it isn't factually there is something you have to be careful with, because that's when people start viewing you as manipulative and stuff like that. So you have to be careful with that one. But if the urgency is legitimate, then absolutely. But in most cases, just be very careful of that comment. Now, creating a sense of value and importance for them, absolutely. But just be careful with the term urgency. And then getting past their concerns. So, buyers have some resistance because they usually have certain things that are concerning them. So the better you're able to clear that, the better it is. So for example, one of the best retail places in the world for getting past that action or that resistance, Costco. Costco, if you remember there, one of the great things about it is anything you buy, you can return basically no questions asked. And that is how they get past the resistance. Because if you walk through a Costco, I can almost guarantee you, if two people are him and hawing about a product, one of the things I'll almost always hear, well, we can always return it. And it's true, you can. Now, a lot of people don't. It's actually one of the big success methods for Costco as an example. But my point is that removing that resistance is key. All right. If you can create a situation, so for example, someone wants to become a member, but they're worried about how much time they're getting out with the family. Certain golf courses, for example, have created family facilities where they've created daycares at the facility. They've created places where people can drop off their kids for a few hours and be watched while they do their golf rounds. Stuff like that is a way that golf courses, for example, have come over some of those resistances. Sorry. So I think we've covered these points. I think I've dug in, and on your review, I think you understand. All right. So problem-solving approach: define the problem, create alternate solutions, evaluate them with them, and then help complete the sale because you have. All right. So this is common in almost anything. Think about something big you bought. You did some form of assessment. So for example, your car, if you've bought a car, or let's say anything that had a significant impact where you'd have to save for months or years. there's always going to be some resistance or some problems you want to overcome. So the question is, how do you do that? No different as a salesperson trying to create an environment where you help them develop truthful and successful ways to get past their concerns or problems is key to being a good salesperson. And do be clear, I did say truthful. All right, there are salespeople out there that do it unethically, and that is not what I'm trying to teach here. So yeah, I want you to read this ethical dilemma, review it. We'll discuss it next class. All right. So these questions I'll discuss more in the next class. So strategic goals, okay. So please understand that the role of the salesperson is a multifaceted role, okay. See, again here. This is a trust-based sales process, and trust is key to this, okay? So you want to make sure that you build that trust to keep everything moving forward, all right? And key word there is trust, all right? Make sure you review this. All right. So as you as a salesperson, what matters? So a great salesperson want greater compensation, which usually means you're compensated based on your success. This would often go inherently against someone, for example, who is in a unionized environment where it's all based on seniority, things like that, okay? Advancement opportunities, can you become the leader of the salespeople? What does that mean? What does that look like? All right. We will get into these in future weeks here. Different types of sales. Inside sales, direct to customer, combination job. Inside sales is dramatically different than direct to customer sales, and we will cover those more in depth. Okay. So empathy, that's actually a hard one for most salespeople. They do have some ego, usually. Self-sufficient and as well as self-leadership are often key. Interpersonal skills, obviously, to be able to connect with more people, and being enthusiastic, being able to smile and do stuff like that we have already covered. These are some other key points. I think everyone can read them, and I think most of it's pretty logical, especially after your review of it before the class. So we'll get into this group activity again next week. These are some of the key terms we covered. What I'd like you to do is let me know which ones you understand or don't, or which ones you're concerned about or didn't get from the readings from the chapter. And here we are, we're at the summary. So I really hope you got a good basic, quick, dirty introduction to selling and salesperson. And then now let's see what we can do to get this figured out for you.